hard on the negotiations. I hope they're successful, even though tempest is fugiting. Time is running out. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President. Senator from Maryland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, we're less than 6 hours away from a potential government shutdown. And I take this time to sort of bring people up to date from Maryland as to where we are on this. And I say that because in Maryland, we have about 150,000 civilian active federal employees. And obviously, they're directly affected if we have a government shutdown. They will not get a paycheck, whether they work or not. They will not be getting their paychecks. And I just want everyone to think about what that means. If you've got a car payment that's due and you don't have a paycheck or a full paycheck, you still have to make that car payment, and you might not have the money to do it. If you have certain responsibilities on a student loan, you may not be able to come up with the money to deal with it. So it's going to cause real problems for those federal workers who had nothing at all to do with the problems that we're confronting in passing a budget. They're not at fault. But yet, they'll be the first ones who will be suffering as a result of a government shutdown. But it doesn't end with the federal workforce. Because the federal workforce, with their salaries, they buy goods and services. Literally thousands of small businesses in Maryland are going to be adversely affected, and many around the country, because of the impact of the federal workforce being on furlough, not getting their checks, the impact that's going to have on our businesses and on our economy. But, Mr. President, it doesn't end there. Federal contractors who depend upon the federal contracts, whether to help us for national security or homeland security or to deal with health care issues, they're going to be infected also because these contracts aren't going to go forward. So, Mr. President, I just really want to continue to underscore that a government shutdown will have a major negative impact, not just on our federal workforce, not just on the businesses that are going to be hurt as a result of it, but on our entire economy, and all of us will suffer. But I really take this time to try to bring people up to date of where we are in the negotiations, because I've heard many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, gee, if we only could balance the budget, if we only could bring up a short-term CR. That's not the problem. It's not the problem we're confronting right now, because quite frankly, the negotiators have agreed on the dollar amount of a budget from now to the end of the year. That number has been agreed to. So this isn't about the federal deficit any longer. It's about whether we can reach an agreement on a budget for the remainder of this year, not the dollar amount. We're now tied up on what we call the policy riders. But we're not even talking about all the policy riders. We're talking about one policy rider, which my colleague from California, Senator Boxer, I think outlined very clearly. And I want to take this time on behalf of my wife, on behalf of my daughter, on behalf of my 2 little granddaughters, because it's about women's health care issues. That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about whether we're going to be able to allow those programs to move forward during the next 6 months. Doesn't affect the dollars. It's the type of programs that we allow. So that make it clear, we're talking about women's health care issues that deal principally with preventive health care. The cancer screenings to keep women healthy. Mr. President, not $1 of those funds can be used for abortion. So let's make that clear from the beginning. This is not an issue. It's not part of the abortion debate. This is talking about whether we should allow this type of policy rider be on this bill. It's not appropriate. I think all of us understand it's not appropriate. But I even go further than that. I'm not even sure it's about that. It just appears to many of us that you have an element in the House of Representatives on the Republican side that really want to see a government shutdown. They have said that. They applauded the Speaker when the Speaker said, let's get prepared for a government shutdown. They gave him standing ovation. They said over and over again, maybe a government shutdown will be good. Well, a government shutdown will not be good. I think we all can agree on that. And this is about the budget, as it should be. A government shutdown costs more money. And then I hear a lot of my colleagues come to the floor and say, look, we've got to get rid of all this red ink and all this deficits. And we could go back to the fact that we did balance the budget in the 1990s. We did it without a single Republican vote. And we took a deficit and we balanced the budget. And when George W. Bush became president, he had a large surplus, only to see the policies of that administration, which went to war and didn't pay for it, ended up with large deficits and an economy that was losing 700,000 jobs a month when Barack Obama became president. We could go back and start talking about how we got here. But the question is, how are we going to get the budget back into balance? And there I agree with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. We need to do that. But remember, the debate tonight on preventing the government from shutting down has nothing to do with that. The dollar amounts are in agreement. It's the policy issues concerning women's health care, or whether, in fact, there's a group on the other side that represent the Tea Party that don't want to enter into an agreement. Remember, they said, don't compromise at all. No compromise was their position, whether they control the day. But I must tell you, Mr. President, we've got to come together and deal with the budget deficit. There's 64 of us, 32 Democrats, 32 Republicans, who've signed a letter saying that we're prepared to consider all the issues in balancing the federal budget, whether it's domestic spending, military spending, mandatory spending, or revenues. And that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to get together and put the nation's interest first. I believe we can do that. I believe we can get this budget into balance. But it starts with a little good faith effort here tonight. Good faith effort when we've already reached the agreement on the dollar amount. Let's not let a minority in the House of Representatives prevent us from keeping government operating. That's what it comes down to. So that the federal worker in Maryland or that person who happens to be in Rhode Island tonight and tomorrow recognizes that he needs his passport renewed in order to take a trip can find the passport office opened, or whether it's that potential homeowner that's going to need an FHA loan, it's told that if there's a government shutdown, that loan can't go forward, or whether it's that family that was planning to come to the nation's capital and enjoy the Smithsonian is going to be told that the Smithsonians are now being closed. Let us not use those individuals as a target for the extreme actions in the other body. Mr. President, I'm convinced that we still have time to get this done. We know that offers have been made in good faith. We know that we have the dollar amounts. So I hope that within the next couple hours we can prevent a government shutdown, because it absolutely makes no sense. My constituents are angry about this, and so am I. And I hope that we'll see reason prevail, and then we can move on and deal with the real budget problems of this country. Can't deal with it on only 12% of the budget, and that's all we're talking about here in this budget for the rest of this year. Hopefully we'll be able to get together and figure out how we can move forward, but it starts with keeping government functioning. It starts with honoring the type of commitments that we've all talked about here to negotiate in good faith. I've said this many times. It's not going to be the budget that the Democrats want. It won't be the budget that the Republicans want. That's what negotiations is about. But when we have someone on the other side says, look, it's going to be our way or no way, that's not the way the process works. And I hope that the majority in the House of Representatives are listening to this debate and listening to the American people and will act in the best interest of the American people and allow the process to move forward so we can keep government functioning. With that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
I request that the pending quorum call be lifted.
Without objection, and the senator is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have come to the end of a long process that has had some signal moments to it. Clearly, one signal moment was a few days ago when the Tea Party activists came to the Capitol, came to this building, gathered outside, and were led by Republican House members in chanting about the United States government, "Shut it down, shut it down, shut it down." Shortly after that, there was a discussion between the Republican Speaker and the members of the Republican caucus in which the Speaker indicated that they were to prepare for a government shutdown. And the response was a standing ovation reported by the Washington Post. As the distinguished senator from Maryland knows, we've sat through our caucus meetings. There's never been anything like an ovation on our side for the concept of a government shutdown. There's silence, maybe an occasional groan of disappointment when we've heard about how the goalposts have been moved yet again to keep an agreement from being reached. Recent polling shows that there's a reason for this difference between the parties here, for the different attitudes and desires with respect to a government shutdown. Democratic voters prefer compromise to a shutdown by better than 3-to-1. By better than 3-to-1, Democratic voters would prefer us to work this out than to shut down the United States government. On the other side, Republican voters actually favor shutting down the government. So it should come as no surprise that these public demonstrations demanding shut it down take place, that the Republican caucus on the House side gives standing ovations to the notion of shutting down the United States government, and that we are now at the brink of a United States government shutdown as a result. There was a time when this appeared to be about the deficit. And clearly we've had to make progress on the deficit, and we've made significant progress on the deficit, as was announced from last night's meeting between the Senate leaders, the President of the United States, and the House leaders, that they had agreed on a $78 billion number out of the $100 billion number that had been the Republican goal. It is hard to say that we have not gone the extra mile when we are settling at a point of $78 billion out of the $100 billion that was requested. Now, as we have looked at the actual cuts that the other side has pushed for, there has appeared to be a pretty strong overlay between the cuts themselves and the political agenda of the other party. Things like focusing 100% of their cost-cutting energy on only the spending side of the budget, and only 12% of the pie, a slice of the pie that is only 12%, was where they focused 100% of their attention. Attacks on programs like Head Start that help poor children get a head start in life and prove exceptional outcomes, to the point where, Mr. President, the mayor of our capital city, Providence, Rhode Island, is a child who got his start in life in a Head Start program. And from there, he went through the public school system. He ended up at Harvard University. He became a lawyer. And he is now the mayor of Rhode Island's capital city. That's the kind of story that Head Start starts. Yet it was the focus of terrible cuts. City Year and Teach for America, programs that take bright young Americans and put them into our schools to help younger kids learn, be better students, and have more productive futures. Catastrophic wipeout cuts were driven at those programs. National Public Radio, catastrophic wipeout cuts. The Environmental Protection Agency was singled out for the worst treatment of all, reflecting the long relationship that has existed between the other party and corporate interests that do considerable damage to our air and waters. So if you look at what they were going for, there were a number of people who became suspicious and concerned that the Republican cost-cutting agenda was a Trojan horse. You'll remember the Trojan horse. Troy was in its walls. The Greeks were outside. They couldn't get through the walls of Troy. They built a horse. The Trojans thought it was a gift, and they allowed it in. But the Trojan horse contained within it Greek soldiers who came out in the night and were able to open the gates, and the attack came on Troy. That's the legend of the Trojan horse. And so there's a pretty good case that I think some of us could make that a lot of what these cuts were was a Trojan horse to bring in, through the deficit-cutting agenda that we all agree on, a different ideological agenda that has long been associated with the Republican Party and that is not very popular. Indeed, at this stage, the Tea Party has less than one-third public support. So the notion of driving their agenda through really isn't fair play. But if you know you're that unpopular, you want to attach yourself to something really essential. You want to try to put a gun to the head of the process to force your ideological agenda. And I think that's right where we are right now. And it's really been made clear by what has happened, because once a number has been agreed to in a budget, clearly the fight is no longer about the budget. And a number has been agreed to, $78 billion. And yet the fight persists, and the fight persists over women's health care. And I just want to share a few stories from Rhode Island. First, about the Title X Family Planning Program, which is the target here. It was signed into law in 1970 by President Richard Milhous Nixon, a Republican. He said at the time that no American woman should be denied access to family planning assistance because of her economic condition. Representative George H.W. Bush strongly supported the enactment of the program. Title X clinics now provide reproductive health services to low-income women and young adults. It is an essential element in our American strategy to reduce unintended pregnancies. And notably, federal law prohibits any Title X funds under the Hyde Amendment from being used for abortion services. None, zero, not permitted. So the effort to zero out funding for Title X is not about federal funding being used to support abortion services. It just isn't. Instead, it's really about denying access to health care programs that serve over 5 million women every year. And it's available to them because no one can be refused service based on the fact that they don't have the ability to pay. We have a medical student wrote in from Rhode Island who works at a community health center. He said that he's been able to perform cervical cancer screenings and prescribe birth control for hundreds of women who would otherwise not have had access to these services, all thanks to Title X. He described his patients. Most of my patients worked hard at low-wage jobs that did not provide adequate health coverage. Indeed, may not have provided any benefits at all. He concluded these women would not have been able to afford such vital health care without the support of Title X. Now, in Rhode Island, Title X goes to 17 different community health centers and clinics, from the Northwest Community Health Center up in Pascoag, Rhode Island, to the Chaffee Health Center in Providence, to the Tri-Town Community Health Center in the Johnston area. It's across the state. One of those recipients is Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood would appear to be the real reason. Although they take the whole program out, it's probably because Planned Parenthood is in it. They've just thrown out the baby with the bath. They've over-targeted here. So this would prohibit Planned Parenthood from receiving any federal funding. It's remarkable because Planned Parenthood provides primary and preventive health care to 3 million Americans each year, and in rural or medically underserved areas, Planned Parenthood health care providers are often the only source of health care in the community, often the only source of health care for women in the community. 90% of the care that is provided at Planned Parenthood health centers is primary and preventive health care. Cancer screenings, Pap tests to identify women at risk of developing cervical cancer, mammograms to help detect breast cancer, routine gynecological exams and annual physicals, immunizations, and tests and treatments for STDs. They are cost-effective and accessible. And let me read some of the things that have come in from Rhode Island. Here's Rebecca from Cranston, Rhode Island, telling her story. After I graduated college, I found myself without health insurance for the first time in my life. While uninsured and job hunting, I had no doctor or gynecologist, and I turned to Planned Parenthood for my basic health care needs. This lasted for almost 4 years because I couldn't get a job with health insurance. If Planned Parenthood had not been there while I was getting on my feet, I would not have received cancer screening, breast exams, or have had a health care professional to answer my questions. My mother had breast cancer twice, and Planned Parenthood providers gave me peace of mind. If the federal funding is cut from Planned Parenthood, other young women will find themselves with nowhere to go and put off life-saving tests. I plan on doing everything I can for this amazing, caring facility that stood by me when I needed them. This is Nora, who wrote to me from Warwick, Rhode Island. Please do not let the loss of funding happen to Planned Parenthood. This health care agency has been a boon to myself and my 2 daughters for decades. If not for the availability of low-cost health care screenings through Planned Parenthood, we would not be able to afford regular checkups for things like cervical cancer and HPV because we cannot afford health insurance. Planned Parenthood provides us the opportunity to have these tests done at a price we can afford. I hope you will take my message to heart and vote to keep the funding in place for this wonderful organization. Yes, Nora, I will take your message to heart. Sarin from Coventry, Rhode Island, wrote in to tell her story. In 2004, I went to Planned Parenthood for a Pap smear test. I didn't have a regular gynecologist or even a primary care doctor. Further testing revealed I had the beginnings of cervical cancer. I was stunned. Never in a million years did I ever expect to be told I had cancer, especially at the age of 24. The doctors at Planned Parenthood told me that the cancer was found early and formulated a course of action. But I was always worried that my chances of having children were low because of the surgery to remove the cancer. 7 years later, I am happy to say I have not had an abnormal pap smear, and I have 2 beautiful, healthy children. I can only wonder where I'd be had I not gone to Planned Parenthood and had that pap smear. Those doctors saved my life and gave me the chance to become a mother. Now, it's getting rid of that that is what is motivating our Republican colleagues to push this country into a government shutdown. And the price of that government shutdown is going to be high. We are just in the beginnings of our recovery. We are still deep in unemployment. In my home state of Rhode Island, we're at 12%. In the Providence metropolitan area, over 11% statewide. We are just beginning to recover. And into this, a government shutdown would cut off the funding for federal employees, would stop their paychecks, would shut down government projects as their funding ran out and they ground to a halt, would shut down the private businesses, the corporations, the consultants that are working on government contracts as that funding ran out and their work ground to a halt. Around the country, 800,000 people off the payroll. That is not good for America. If we passed H.R. 1, the folks at Goldman Sachs, we can say a lot of things about the folks at Goldman Sachs, but I don't think there's anybody in this room who will say they're not good with numbers about the economy, have said that it will drastically knock down our recovery. 2 full percentage points out of the 3 percentage point growth we're projecting would be knocked out. That's about the same number of jobs. Add that to the 800,000 jobs that would have their payroll stopped during a federal government shutdown, and our recovery is basically gone at that point. We're back to where we started when President Obama took office and turned around the 700,000 job a month crash that we were in, losing 700,000 jobs every month. So it's been a slow and painful way back. We don't want to knock that down with H.R. 1, the extreme House bill, and we certainly don't want to knock that down with a government shutdown that takes all that money out of the economy. And even more, we don't want to do it over a dispute that is now no longer about the budget, no longer about the deficit, but only about trying to punish the program that allowed Sharon from Coventry to discover her cervical cancer in time, to get it treated so that she could survive that dangerous illness and have her dream of becoming a mother come true through 2 beautiful children. So I urge us to get through this moment. I hope that my colleagues will frankly declare victory. Gloat a little. We wanted $100 billion and we got 78. We got way more than halfway. But don't knock this country down. Don't knock our government into a shutdown in order to score a political point about an organization that is so important to women's health care. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
For the quorum call to be rescinded, please.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have been carefully listening to the speeches of my colleagues, including the statements of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I feel compelled to come to the floor to speak about what I believe is a red herring and a political ploy. This debate is not about women. As the mother of 2 children, one of them being my 6-year-old daughter, I believe it is unfair and inaccurate to say that this is about women and their health. Let's be clear on how we got to this point. Last year, even though they had majorities in both houses, the Democrats failed to pass a budget for 2011 or even a single appropriations bill. And now the House has passed full funding for our military for the rest of this fiscal year and funding for the rest of our government for 1 week to allow us to resolve the remaining issues. That proposal doesn't even cut Title X funding. Yet we have heard from speaker after speaker from the other side come to this floor and mischaracterize the potential shutdown of our government as being about women's health. So let's talk about what we know to be true. We can end this potential government shutdown right now if the majority allows us to vote on the proposal that the House has already passed that fully funds our military for the rest of this fiscal year and gives us a week to resolve the remaining issues and to resolve this once and for all. Then we can move on to the bigger issues that we face in addressing the $14 trillion debt that threatens our economic strength, threatens our national security, as our chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has told us. And as a military spouse, I think we owe it to our men and women in uniform and their families who are right now making sacrifices for us overseas and around the world to immediately pass funding for our military for the remainder of this fiscal year, to pass the proposal that the House has made. Our military deserves better than political ploys and red herrings. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum. Thank you, Mr. President.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
That the calling of the quorum be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, before I speak, is there a time limit in morning business?
10 minutes, sir.
I would ask unanimous consent that I could speak for 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Yeah. Mr. President, usually on a Friday, by this time of a Friday or even a little earlier, I'm always have the pleasure of going back to Iowa every weekend. And I'd much rather be doing that. But obviously we've got problems that have to be worked out here, and there's reason for staying around this weekend, particularly for those of us that don't miss votes, and we don't want to miss a vote, hopefully, to keep government functioning. But there is one advantage of not being on the airplane going back to Iowa, and on a Friday, when you don't have committee meetings and constituent meetings, I've been able to listen to a lot of the speeches today. And you don't get that opportunity Monday through Thursday very often. And so it's quite a pleasure to be able to hear my colleagues speak as they have on both sides of the aisle so strongly about different held views in this body about the budget issues and subsidiary issues that are being discussed at this particular time. Listening to the debate, I've come to the conclusion that it was one big mistake that we didn't get appropriation bills passed last year. And I would hope that people on the other side of the aisle would realize that if those appropriation bills had been passed, that we wouldn't be here today worrying about shutting down government and reaching some gigantic compromise. And I suppose that on the other side of the aisle there's a lot of ill feeling about not taking advantage of the fact that last year there were 59 Democrats and only 41 Republicans in this body. So the majority party could do just about anything they wanted to do. And, of course, in the House of Representatives, it was overwhelmingly controlled by the other political party. And that control, particularly where appropriation bills pass, you know, but looking back now, I realize that there wasn't any attempt to bring up any appropriation bills, which obviously isn't a good way to run the government. And I did listen to some excuses from the other side of the aisle where people were asked, well, how come no appropriation bills were passed? And the answer from some senators said, well, you know, we only had 59 votes and Republicans wouldn't let us bring it up. But then I was in a quandary. There wasn't anything stopping the overwhelming majority of the Democratic Party in the other body to pass almost anything they want to, because it's just a political fact of life. Whether you have a Republican majority in the House of Representatives or a Democrat majority in the House of Representatives, they can get, as long as they stick together, they can get anything done they want to get done. And they can ignore the minority. Now, may not have been able to ignore the minority in the Senate if 41 Republicans would stick together, but they hardly ever do. What a mistake it must have been now for the Democratic Party not to pass appropriation bills last year so that we wouldn't be going through this. But it wasn't done. I think now, looking back, because probably they didn't want discussion of budget issues before the election, because they didn't want the public being reminded about a $1.5 trillion deficit. In other words, we borrow about 42 cents out of every dollar we spend, and we take in about $2 2/10 trillion and spend $3 7/10 trillion, and that's in the neighborhood of a $1.5 trillion deficit. They probably didn't want that talked about. So come October the 1st, pass a continuing resolution until December, and then get through the election, and then then we'll take care of it when we get back here. But, you know, the elections are supposed to have consequences, and they do have consequences. I mean, if they don't have consequences, representative government democracy doesn't mean much. And so, as the President himself said, he took a shellacking. And they couldn't get a pass before Christmas, so the new people come in and take over, and it's the biggest turnover in Congress since 1938. And a lot of new people have a lot of new things to learn, and doesn't get done by March the 4th, because it was extended before Christmas to March the 4th, and then 2 weeks to March the 18th, and then 3 weeks until this very day. But what a mistake when overwhelming majorities, this didn't get done in the usual time when we pass 12 appropriation bills to get things funded. So it was very clear in the election that people wanted to stop this deficit spending, get the spending down, and get the size of government down. And so the biggest turnover in Congress since 1938, they're going to expect some changes to be made. And that's what is going on right now on the level of expenditures. Now, we're led to believe by people on the other side that money is not the issue. It's some social policy that's being debated and holding this up from happening. But I know this, that the only possibility of not shutting down government, at least that's partly through, the Republicans in Congress are the only ones who put forward legislation to reduce spending and to keep government open. It's kind of a common sense approach that's used by the other body in sending us a bill that will fund defense through the end of the year, give more time for negotiation on the rest of the budget, and funding defense through the end of the year. You can't fight a war from week to week under how much money you got to spend. We vote to put in the war on terror our men and women in danger. You ought to give them as much certainty as you can. And even now, the possibility of not being paid, or the possibility of their families not getting the support that they're entitled to. It's just a terrible sin when you ask people to defend the country. So, that's the bill that we ought to be taking up. But here we are. There isn't any desire here to take it up. And the President says he's going to veto a bill. Why would the President be vetoing a bill that's going to give certainty to the military, the Defense Department, of what they can have to spend and to do the job that they're supposed to do, the number one function of the federal government, our national security, and particularly for the families that are standing behind them. So here we are, trying to preempt, as far as domestic expenditures are concerned, the 22% increase that took place in 2009 and 2010. You know, when you only have economic growth of 2.5% to 3%, you can't be spending money at 22% increases, and that's on top of the $814 billion stimulus bill that was passed. That was supposed to keep unemployment under 8%, and obviously hasn't kept unemployment under 8%. So preempt that and go back to the 2008 level of expenditures. And I never heard people complaining in 2008 that there wasn't enough money appropriated to function for the functions of government. That's very necessary that we do that, because you can't incorporate that 22% up here and build that into the base over the 10-year budget window. There's hundreds of billions of dollars difference to the 2008 level of expenditures and the 2010 levels of expenditures. And that's what it's going to take. We got to be looking ahead for the next 60 years, not just the next 6 months. And we need to take this gradual step towards the reduction of spending so that government stops spending money that we don't have. We got to start making decisions that are necessary about the future of our country. And to a great extent, Washington is responsible for some of this. Reduce wasteful government spending. We got to tighten our belt here in Washington, as families do at home. One of the rules of digging a hole, if you're digging a hole deeper, stop digging. And this bill sent over here from the House will be a first step towards doing that. But for sure, the public has a right to know the facts. And they don't want us with those facts that they know that we're leaving our children a bankrupt situation if we don't immediately intervene and do something about it. But also, this discussion about getting government spending down has something to do with simply creating an environment of certainty for our private sector, because you have uncertainty in taxes, you have uncertainty in EPA regulations, you have uncertainty from the fiscal policy of the federal government. How much money are we going to continue to borrow and take away from the private sector? All of these things are lead to a reluctance of employers large and small in this country to hire people. So this debate is about creating jobs, putting in place a fiscal policy along with a lot of other sensible policies we ought to do. But you know, when you use the word sensible policy, people back home might not know this, but this city is an island surrounded by reality. And the only business in this town is government. And people in government, including those of us that are elected, are in the wagon and somebody else is pulling the wagon. And so we have to go home to our districts and bring back some common sense here, and that common sense says that government ought to live like families live within their means. And those are the President's words, not mine, because when he put his budget out early February, he said government has to live within its means. And then what sort of a budget does he put out? A 10-year budget window that increases the national debt from $14 trillion to $26 trillion. So I hope that we get something agreed to tonight. I hope that government does not shut down. It doesn't save money like people think it should. It actually costs money, and it costs people the services that they're entitled to. But if you don't remember anything else that this senator says today, that elections have consequences, and there were great messages sent in this last election, and the people expect us to let them know that we get it and that there aren't any excuses in the process. I yield the floor.